Adrian, it ain't what you got, it's what you give. And we're giving you everything we've got on Tesla coming up next on the world's givingest podcast, Courtesy Listen. Welcome to Courtesy Listen.
The podcast that explores an artist's entire catalog
We'll listen to every studio album
and any other essential recordings.
sharing our thoughts along the way.
Some of those albums will be good,
And some will be bad, but they all deserve
a courtesy listen.
Welcome back, everyone. Great to be with you again as we kind of get into a slightly different, I think, genre of music than we've done to this point. We've certainly been heavy in rock, but
we haven't
80s,
done.
yeah,
We haven't
80s
done
hair
one of these
metal.
yet.
80s hair metal is kind of new territory for us. Before we jump into Tesla, I would love to hear, Adrian, what are your overall thoughts on like what's considered 80s hair metal? I know hair metal is considered a derogatory term, but for simplicity's sake, I don't mean it that way. We'll get into how much I love it, but
You
I would love to hear what you think of it.
Yeah, you're definitely not the general public when it comes to talking about hair metal, I think, right? Like,
Yeah,
I don't know. I think of just men with no shirts and a lot of hair. I should have done more to mine today, I think, in honor of this episode. But yeah, a lot of flying V guitars and people dancing around the stage. And, and I don't think it's the music itself is typically well regarded.
Yeah. And that's a shame to me because I think, the musicality of the folks who were in a lot of these bands is really underrated. I think a lot of these guys were very proficient at their instruments, and I think a lot was made of sort of the visual style and sort of the excesses that they enjoyed on the road for the most part. And the fact that this was, the onset of MTV and a lot was put into their music videos, whereas their previous generation we're not making music videos and we're not performing for the cameras the same way. So
this is kind of the start of gimmicks, right? Of, you know what I mean? Just like you said, the video and the visual maybe wasn't as important previously, but at least not to the extent that MTV and music videos brought on. So yeah, I could see that.
And I'll just say real quick, the older I've gotten, I think the more I've gotten into hair metal, if you will, because for a number of reasons. I like it for the same reasons that I enjoy pro wrestling. It's extremely, shall we say, produced, or in wrestling cases, scripted. But it's produced or scripted in such a way to make it as entertaining as possible for the consumer at all times, and I think a lot of people kind of thumb their noses at the level of production in some of this music, but to me, that's a plus. That's a feature. So
they found their audience then, I guess.
Yeah. I would love to see hair metal make a comeback. With that aside,
interesting. I don't think that could happen.
I don't think it could either. For various reasons. For one, nobody can play guitar anymore. Come on. Anyway. Also, it was problematic in various ways, but not belaboring that. The band of the day is Tesla. Tesla was formed originally in 1981 with guitarist Frank Hannon, and they're from Sacramento, California, and I believe they're probably the most famous musical act from Sacramento. I will confess that I did not do a deep dive into Sacramento musical history. Their original name was City Kid. Kid spelled with 2 D's. And real talk here for a second.
When you think of Sacramento, I don't think of urban youth, city kid coming out of Sacramento, right?
So I took my first trip to Sacramento back in May.
Sacramento, yeah.
And it's a nice town. I enjoyed my time there. I don't know what it would have been like 40 years ago. But we'll just say I actually think City Kid's a really cool name for a band. But
I'll take it with 1 D, not 2 D's. That's excessive. That maybe that goes back to the gimmicks of hair metal, right?
This was also pre-Sacramento Kings I think the Kings moved there in 85. Anyway, the Kings moved to town, and all of a sudden Tesla takes off. Tesla is Jeff Keith on vocals. They've the double guitar attack of Frank Hannon, and then I don't know how to say the other guy's name. Is it Tommy Scotch? Is it Sketch? Is it Skiatch? What pronunciation should we agree on? Scotch?
I think it's, oh well, that ch on the end, that could be anything, right? Like, let's go with
Yeah,
skiatch. Let's go with skiatch.
Skiatch. All right. Bass
Stoik.
Brian Wheat and Troy Lucetta on drums. Heavy metal kind of took
Hmm.
off in the
Hmm.
80s and was kind of mixed with pop and whatnot, and sort of it was heavy music, but it was had pop hooks and was made to be played, made to appeal to the masses, and certainly to young people at the time. And
Sure.
this was
When
sort
did
of
they?
the
When did Tesla come in the range of hair metal? Were they early hair metal? Were they late to the
no,
game hair metal? They were
no.
right
So they
in.
were right in the middle. Um, because for me, early hair metal I would consider to be like 83. And I'm not a hair metal scholar the way that like Chuck Klosterman is or somebody like that. I would say like 83 is really the start. I believe Round and Round by Rat came out in 83. That Quiet Riot album, that has Come On Feel the Noise, that came out in 83. So 83 was really what I consider to be like the onset of its like mainstream popularity, and then it starts hitting its stride sort of in the next couple of years. So Tesla's first album is 86. As we've previously established, 1986 is the greatest year in music history. So that's a fine time to come on. Would be nice if you were hitting your stride at that point, but that's okay. The last thing I do want to say about, well, a couple more things about Tesla. They resisted the hair metal label for many years. They
Interesting.
did not like that it was, they were kind of lumped in with all of that. It's easy to see why. Just as many people did not like, many of those bands didn't like grunge, the label
Hmm.
grunge, and felt like
Hmm.
they were different from one another. A lot of people don't like the term yacht rock. Anytime you use like sort of this pejorative term to describe, a genre of music that's sort of current, or in yacht rock's case, not current, but
Well, I
um,
think also for Tesla though, they aren't really like one note. We'll
no,
find as we talk about them that there's a variety of sounds and
yeah,
influences. And so to
and I
be
would,
kind of like just lumped into this one category, I could see how that would be like, no, no, we're more than that. We're more than
yeah,
metal or hair metal.
and I would say they were a little bluesier than a
Yes.
lot of the other hair metal. Like you hear a lot more blues than you do in like Poison,
Yep.
um, and so I think that's notable. Um, their style, I would say, is probably like two parts Aerosmith, like one part Led Zeppelin, and probably like one part Kiss. If I was gonna try to make a very lazy approximation.
Yeah, say four parts Aerosmith, one part Led Zeppelin.
See, my only thing is they're heavier than Aerosmith. You know what I mean? Like Aerosmith never really got into like that heavy riffing that you would hear like in a Black Sabbath song or something like that. But Jeff Keith is very, very much, influenced by Steven Tyler.
Yes,
Absolutely.
absolutely. Yep.
Um, and then the last thing I kind of wanted to say up top is the other notable thing about Tesla is Tesla's worldview is a little different than what I consider to be sort of the broad worldview of hair metal in general, which is to say
Hmm.
this is like the Reagan 80s, and I think the hair metal scene reflected that in a certain way, or was just completely apolitical altogether, which was sort of the point of a lot of it.
Yep.
Tesla definitely has sort of a you know sort of a Grateful Dead, like world peace sort of vibe, you know what I
Hmm.
mean, going on, but through the lens of the 80s, which we'll kind of get to. It's a very
Yes.
interesting dichotomy with them.
Okay.
So I think that's
Interesting.
notable too.
Yep.
But with that, we will go ahead and get into the albums, and we will start in December of 1986, the tail end of the greatest year in musical history. They would
According to
release,
Tom
according to me,
Deary, you have to like
uh,
caveat that always.
yes, they would release Mechanical Resonance, their debut album. And so, Adrian, would love to hear what you thought of Mechanical Resonance.
Sure. Well, I try to listen to the albums in order when we're doing this. And so I had never, I don't think, heard of Tesla before, had never listened to Tesla before this. So this was like my first introduction to them, was listening to this Mechanical Resonance album. Yeah, I thought, when you said this is a hair metal band, I turned it on. I was like, yep, this is a hair metal band, right? Right off the bat, the first track is it made me laugh personally. Easy come, easy go. But it is, I don't know if it's this way on the LP or just on Spotify these days or what, but it's written capital E, lowercase z, right? Which my son's name is Ezra and we call him Ez. And so in my mind, this is not easy come, easy go. This is as come, as go, which
That's really funny.
But yeah, I mean, it's a great opening song. It's it really, I think it grabs you right at the beginning. I enjoyed the song Getting Better, which is like a kind of a ballad of a song with a positive message, which is interesting hearing you talk about, kind of how they are on this like Grateful Dead, everybody, get along kind of band. You can totally see that there, but it doesn't just stay this like soft ballad. It definitely grows into a rock song as it goes on. And then Little Susie, I really enjoy, just kind of like a quieter
Great
tune,
song, man.
right? And I think this first album was a great introduction to them because there is such a variety of music types and variety in the albums, every album. So yeah, this was a great one, a good strong start.
Yeah.
What about you? Yeah, what about you?
I really like this album.
Okay.
I think it's a great debut. I think they were still kind of figuring out songwriting because some of the songs are strong. Some of the songs are kind of like, I think, paint by numbers, like metal type of song. But on the ones where they're Modern Day Cowboy was the big hit from this album. That's a great tune, man. 80s hair metal was full of a lot of cowboy imagery, just because it's a very macho genre, so of course you got like Bon Jovi, Wanted Dead or Alive. You've got Pantera, which isn't quite hair metal, but Pantera's Cowboys from Hell. There's just a lot of songs about cowboys, 80s Clint Eastwood. I mean,
right.
But, and like the first two verses are kind of, very standard cowboy stuff. And then in the third verse, he kind of flips it with this, nothing's changed, things are worse than ever. And then he says the USA, the USSR, because it's still the end of the Cold War. And he's saying like, those are the cowboys now. I actually thought like that was an interesting point for sort of an 80s metal band to make. Mm-hmm. So I liked that.
Do you know who wrote their songs? Was it one guy? Do you have any idea?
I got the impression I didn't check every single one of them, but the band, every member, I think, contributed to various songs. You know what I mean? They all seem to really have a part in the creative process. A lot of this album, being that it's 86, I expected like a much more 80s production sound throughout. A lot of it sounds like like it came from the 80s, but it's not. There are other albums of the time where, the noise gating on the drums is a lot more, and just like the overall sound. Like Little Susie, you could tell me that was like 79 and I would probably believe it. It does not sound like an 80s song.
No.
But then you get like Changes, which Changes is basically a Foreigner song, just in the way that it sounds. But no, I thought this was a really solid album. Definitely still figuring things out, I think, for being
it's their debut album. So it's going to be, it's the first foray. And I think it's a great representation of who they are as a band, because you see this continue through. And
and the last thing I'll say is really shows off the dual guitar attack of Tommy and Frank. And gosh, those guys have such great chemistry together. And like Modern Day Cowboy, I mean, that song, the shredding on that song is just incredible. It's just a great guitar album. If you like excellent guitar work, I don't see how you could not enjoy this album. I can see how the production, that's a matter of taste. But gosh, the guitar work on this album is so good.
They can play for sure.
Yeah. That will bring us to February of 1989, just over 2 years later. And for those of you who are frequent watchers of the show, you'll know that 1989, in my opinion, the second greatest year in music history. So Tesla's hitting all the high points. February 1989, we get the Great Radio Controversy. Now, I just want to throw out, this one was produced by Michael Barbiero, who co-produced the first album, but he solo produces this one. He has a long career as a producer and engineer and stuff. He was the mixer for Recovering the Satellites.
Oh, really?
Yes. Yes. And his fingerprints are kind of on this, because now that I feel like now that he has sort of sole control over the sound of this album, it's a lot glossier than their debut.
That's interesting that you said that, because there were, I cannot remember which song or which album. Now I'm going to have to like go back and hunt for it. But there were definite songs that I was like, I could hear this as a Counting Crows song. Like, I don't know if it's one that had maybe like there's some mandolin sprinkled in there somewhere, as they do on a couple of their songs. But I was like, yeah, I could hear this.
I thought that opening few, the side A is just so strong. The opener, Hang Tough, is an all-timer for Tesla. That is a great song. And I just wanted to acknowledge the elephant here, and that is, what was going on in 1989 that made it such a big year for the concept of hanging tough? Because that was also when New Kids on the Block had a huge hit with Hanging Tough.
Interesting.
The single came out in 89. The album of the same name came out actually in late 88. But
yeah,
gosh, 1989 was the year of Hanging Tough.
Right. It was probably like a movie quote in 88 or something, or somebody,
Maybe.
It was like the slang of the day, slang of the time. Who knows?
Was it like Michael Dukakis's campaign slogan or something?
I'll have to Google that one after the show.
What did you think of Hang Tough? No, not Hang Tough. What did you think of the Great Radio Controversy?
No, I'll tell you what I think of Hang Tough and the Great Radio Controversy. I liked Hang Tough a lot.
Yeah, what a great song.
Great intro, like starts out with this really strong kind of bass intro, right? Which is funny in my mind.
That's the bass. That is the bass lick to Mountain Song by Jane's Addiction. They're very close to it, but Hang Tough came out first.
Interesting, because it reminded me of Tom Sawyer by Rush. Like, it sounded like,
oh yeah,
Tom Sawyer by Rush, and it also sounded like a Veruca Salt song called Shutterbug, which I was like, this is oddly reminiscent of, they were first. I was like, Veruca Salt was like ripped them off. It was very interesting. So you'll have to go back and listen to that one.
Yeah,
but I thought that was it was a great opening track. The album as a whole, I think was a good album that I enjoyed. Love Song is on there, which I guess is their biggest hit, but I wouldn't know, I don't know these things, but was a good like 80s power ballad, like a romance kind of song. And then as here and there, you get these kind of like, their lyrics are not, I would say that they are not strong lyricists, right? They're kind of, rhyming just whatever two words they can rhyme at the end of a lyric, or, kind of some juvenile themes here and there. But for all of that, on this album, we have Be a Man is the title of this song, right? And this was like a surprising little bit of maturity for them. For, people who normally you're like, did a bunch of 14-year-old boys get together and write this album? But this one, was really talking about kind of, I mean, you can probably speak to it better than I can, but, like, what does it take to be a man? It's not how you look, but like working hard for your family and putting in your time,
helping people and stuff like that. It's a pretty progressive song for its time.
Right. Especially coming from a bunch of guys with big hair dancing around the stage and all of this.
Yeah.
That goes along with hair metal. So yeah, I thought that was a good album. Yeah. I enjoyed it. What about you?
Yeah, I loved this album.
Yeah.
And this has been one that I've enjoyed for years. Didn't need much encouragement to listen to it a few times in preparation for this. Hang Tough, awesome song. Like, if I was a wrestler, that would be in contention for my entrance theme. And what else? Goes into Lady Luck, great tune. That Heaven's Trail, that almost feels like a Led Zeppelin type of song, and I really like that one. But Love Song's an incredible tune. And I'm gonna go out on a limb here. the song November Rain would not exist if not for Love Song. Like,
Really?
I just feel like the whole structure of November Rain is laid out by Love Song. And that guitar solo at the end, that's one of those guitar solos that I can like sing every note of. Like it's such a great and memorable guitar line, and I just love it. It's an awesome song. It's like
Yep.
what 6-7 minutes, but gosh, it
Yeah.
feels like three.
They
It's
don't
just
have too many like big, long songs.
yeah,
So when they do, you're like, okay, this is something here, right? So yeah. And it sounds like a hair metal kind of song. I feel like you could
yeah,
have had that any name a hair metal band and they could have all
right.
done Love Song as their song.
It's it's an album that you would never mistake this for not being an 80s. Like this one
Right.
sounds much more like an 80s album throughout than Mechanical Resonance does. And I don't mean that in a bad way. Like this is one of those albums that when I listen to it, it takes me back to a day being like 7 years old. Because that's how old I was in 1980. Even though I didn't know this album
Mm-hmm.
existed at the time, um, it still makes me feel like I'm living in 1989 in a good
Yep.
way.
Yep.
I just adore it. So after the success, this was a big breakthrough for them. And after this success, they would go on to take a diversion to record not just a live album, but an acoustic live album. And this really predates MTV Unplugged. Like this was not a thing at the time.
Right.
And I'm curious to know whether or not their label supported this idea or if they kind of had to talk them into it. Like, the whole
Hmm.
like, hey, we're going to sit no frills, sit on a bunch of stools on a stage, and we're going to
Right.
play our songs acoustically. Like, I
Right.
wonder if the label was like, you sure? Or if they, or even if the label
Or
came
was
up
it the
with it.
labels doing? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Who's pushing this idea?
But in July 1990, we get Five Man Acoustical Jam, which is an entirely acoustic concert with one notable exception. So, what did you think?
Yeah. This one, I'm not a big 80s music fan as we've established in previous episodes, and definitely not an 80s hair metal fan. But this album I really enjoyed, obviously
So good.
because it was kind of stripped away from all that hair metal hullabaloo, and it was these guys and their guitars, and yeah, it was awesome. The hearing the energy between them and the crowd, and hearing kind of them joking back and forth, chit chat, all of that. It's not just music; it's them kind of interacting, which was fun. I love the covers that they included in here, which is kind of crazy, right? And you
Yes.
mentioned the Grateful Dead. They did "Truckin'" by the Grateful Dead. They did "We Can Work It Out" by the Beatles. CCR, they did a CCR song on here. So that was interesting, and hearing them doing this like wide variety of cover songs, you understand that maybe this is why they also have such a wide variety in their music, right? That they're not one note appreciators of music, but they have all these different influences. So yeah, it was good to hear. It did make me stop and go, like, are they out of good, like, we not the best, strongest songwriters, and are they 2 albums in and they're like, okay, well, we got nothing, but we've got 2 albums worth of songs and we can play some cover songs. So then they threw this together, to make up for that. If actually writing a third album was a bit of a stretch for them, but yeah, this was a great release in my mind.
Yeah. I love this album. And this was, for a long time, this was pretty much the only Tesla I knew, was this version of Love Song, and especially their cover of Signs. Their cover of Signs was a number 8 hit on the Hot 100,
Wow.
big time hit. And it's the most famous version of that song, I would say. I mean, of course, the original. I don't even know what year the original was released.
Uh,
Um, but the original was by, I believe they're called Five Man Electrical Band, which is what the title of the
it
album
all
comes
makes
from.
sense. Yes.
Um, Signs is a great song though, and especially the way they interpret that song. Like Jeff Keith was like born to sing that. He puts so much into singing that song, and you can just tell how much he loves the lyrics and everything,
Mm-hmm.
and it really
Mm-hmm.
takes it to another level. I also this is a juvenile thing to enjoy, but I love how he just throws in random profanity throughout the song, even though the original didn't have it.
Well, like we said, they're a good mix, I guess, of maybe
Yeah,
kind of the sacred and
it's
the
great.
profane here, right?
It's
Yeah.
great.
So,
I like that. But yeah, you mentioned the covers. They open with "Coming at You Live," which is off Mechanical Resonance, and then they kind of trade. Tommy and Frank trade solos for a while, which is excellent.
mm-hmm,
And the
mm-hmm,
fact that their guitar, mastery, they kind of show it's not just electric. Like those
right.
guys are both really adept acoustic players. Um, and then they kind of there's a few key changes in there, and then they get to trucking, and the whole crowd recognizes it immediately
Yep.
and just
Yep.
goes nuts, man. And there again, he throws in kind of random profanity into trucking, which I enjoyed that too. That was good. The real show stealer is Love Song on here.
Mm-hmm.
Like Frank Hannon does that crazy intro where he throws in "Crazy on You."
Yep.
Just the lick from that. Um, and then he starts doing that dun, 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 and the whole crowd just like
Yeah.
erupts,
Yeah, they
and
know. They know
um,
exactly. This is what they've been waiting for, right?
yeah,
It's like pretty far down in the set list, and they're like, when are they going to play the hit? When are they going to play the hit? Right? And there it is.
yeah. And I made you watch the video to this because I felt
Yeah.
like the video, you really have to watch the video of this to appreciate it.
And watching that video, I was like, oh, it's uh, what's his name? Steven Tyler. Steven
Yeah,
Tyler knockoff here on the stage, but having a good time doing what he does. So that's good. Good for him.
it was so good. And like that part when the whole crowd starts, when he lets the crowd sing during the chorus, like, oh, it gives me chills every
Mm-hmm.
time. And like, you can just tell from that performance, like how much the band really loves their fans.
Right.
And that would not remain a part of music, not for Tesla. I mean, for music in general. When we get to grunge, oh, different story.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like those bands could not stand their fans by and
Right.
large, through my perception. I don't know, but just 90s in general. The bands didn't have the same connection to their fans
Mm-hmm.
that 80s
Yes.
band did. I would have given anything to be at that concert. I really would have. It just looks so cool.
Yeah, I'm sure it was a good time.
And for me, this album, this acoustic album, is really sort of the eulogy for 80s hair metal. Like this is sort of the parting word, and the following year, everything would change.
Yeah,
You know.
absolutely.
But let's go ahead to the following year. That was July 1990. Our next album on the list, Psychotic Supper, was released September 10th, 1991, and that date is significant for two reasons. On August 27th, 1991, 2 weeks earlier, Pearl Jam released 10. And on September 24th, 1991, 2 weeks after, Nirvana released Nevermind. Adrian, in with all of that happening, what's your take on Psychotic Supper?
Yeah, this one, Psychotic Supper. When I listen to this, again, listening to these albums in order, I get to the live album, questioning why we're doing a live album as a third album in. And I'm like, well, maybe these are, maybe they're running out of songs. And then the start of Psychotic Supper, I was like, yeah, I think they're running out of songs. I feel like this one definitely was not as strong as their first two albums.
How dare you?
Yeah, I don't know. But Song and Emotion was one of the tracks that really stood out to me. It's this whole long, like, epic,
8 minutes.
8-minute long song, yes, of how fame has passed you by and all of this stuff. So he's, whichever part of the band wrote that one, maybe they're dealing with something and having maybe these bigger names, like you said, you mentioned all these big names releasing albums around the same time as them. I'm assuming that Tesla is being surpassed and usurped by these newer, offerings that are rolling out. So that one was interesting. There's a song about time where he's talking about, we got to get out the door and just go to work and toil away. But it just made me laugh because mornings at our house are chaos. And I'm sure you feel the same. And he's talking about get out the door at 7:30 and get the kids to school. And just, that one made me laugh. But let's see what else is on here. Did you catch the Doors reference on this one, on this album, Tom? Since
I don't
we've
know that I did.
spoken about the Doors recently, in the song "Had Enough," he says, "Gotta take me higher, light my fire," which I think
Hmm.
was a call out there to the Doors. I didn't really have a standout favorite on this album. What You Give has some really kind of pretty acoustic parts to it, and the ending song, "Toke About It," has very odd lyrics and a very odd subject matter, but all this musicality. It's bluesy. It has an organ part. It has all these great guitar
Yeah.
solos. So you like. I feel like with a lot of these Tesla songs, you kind of it's a give and take where you're like the music is great and you just know going into it like okay this isn't going to be no lyrics are going to be posted on my AOL Instant Messenger, 5 or 10 years from now when this comes out. Like the lyrics leave a little to be desired, but the music is fabulous.
I'm going to hard disagree with you here because I actually
Really?
think the best lyrics they wrote are on a song on this album.
Which one?
Possibly, I'd say my second favorite Tesla song after Hang Tough is Edison's Medicine. Edison's Medicine is a great song. The guitar work in it is incredible. But the song is literally about the life of Nikola Tesla. It's a fascinating. They actually tell the story really well, and the phrases in it are interesting. But then there's sort of like after the solo, there's like almost like a spoken word part where he's like, "I spent
Yeah.
10 years or 12 years, of being in school, and he's complaining about how he never heard about Tesla. He only heard about Thomas Edison when really,
Yeah.
Tesla was a much more admirable person and arguably a more prominent genius than Thomas Edison. Um, but it has the great line, "They'll sell you Marconi, familiar but phony." And I would argue Marconi is not. I don't even know who Marconi is. I guess he's some other inventor. But nonetheless, it's a great line. I love Edison's Medicine, though. Great
I
tune.
wonder. I wonder how many people knew about Nikola Tesla at that time. You know what I mean? Tesla's now
Yeah,
it's such a ubiquitous name. It's like
right,
everybody
right.
kind of knows. But then, before the internet has really gone wide, widely available and all of that, was this band Tesla? What's Tesla? Or obviously people in science or with a science background knew, but I wonder
Right.
if the general public
I
understood
honestly,
the
though,
reference.
no, he was not. I certainly didn't know who Tesla was until
Tesla
adulthood.
coil, if you know what a
Um,
Tesla coil is, maybe I
yeah,
don't know.
but it's just. I mean, it's a great song. Like that chorus goes so hard. That
Hmm.
man at a
Hmm.
time, man at a time. Oh,
Yeah.
that was bad. It's way out of my range. But I'll probably cut that. But that song and emotion, that song's awesome, and it leads right into time, and it kind of does the
Hmm.
same thing Pink Floyd does on their own song called Time, where you have the
Yep.
clocks at the beginning. Like I
Clocks
kind of
ticking
enjoyed
and
that.
yeah. What did you think about government personnel and freedom slaves? This is again like getting back into what you said about them kind of I felt like that was
They
kind of out of
were,
left field, right?
yeah,
And
I'm
you're like,
telling you, they're an interesting group. Yeah, government personnel is like 1 minute long, and it's sort of
yeah,
like a Arlo Guthrie style folk
yes.
tune, except it's kind of violent, and complains about the government.
Yep.
And yeah, like I said, kind of a different worldview than most hair metal bands. I thought they were good, but the other one, "What You Give," is such a classic power
Hmm.
ballad,
Hmm.
and the bad luck of this album is that it came out in September of 1991. If they had put this album out 6 months earlier, this album still went platinum. Like I feel like
Really?
it's regarded as sort of a flop. It still went platinum. Like people still bought this.
Hmm.
If this comes out 6 months earlier, I think it probably sells double that.
Right.
I think "What You Give's" a big hit the summer of 91. Then I think maybe that success encourages Geffen, their record label, to invest and promote their next album.
Hmm.
Because some other, you know, older hard rock bands were still making records at that point, like Van Halen and Aerosmith in 1993 put out "Get a Grip," so like Metallica, so there were still metal bands or hard rock bands that were putting out records and were getting big budgets to put out records.
Mm-hmm.
And if this album had done better, then the next album may have been different, and maybe their whole
Sure.
career trajectory is different. So timing's everything. What You Give, though, is an awesome song. That's a great chorus. That is like that is on the short list, probably the long list of songs that I would consider having played at my funeral. And then Talk About It. I'm with you. I didn't know Talk About It until this exercise. And I saw the title and I was just like, oh, that's going to be
Yeah, you're like,
bad.
here we go. Yeah.
That song's awesome.
Yes.
It's got that great bluesy interlude.
Yeah,
Great,
absolutely.
Yeah, like you said, that song ended up being really good. So
Yeah.
I think this is a really solid album. Like, I already knew, I'd say I knew probably half this album. I've liked Edison's Medicine for a long time. But I had never listened to it all the way through. So yeah, I was quite encouraged with the album as a whole. Bit of a layoff after that. We jump nearly 3 years into the future. So all of grunge basically passes us by. August 1994, they released what I'm going to call number 4, harkening back to Stone Temple Pilots. The album title is a little too juvenile and
right, the perfect shining example
distasteful, a little distasteful for my, so I won't be referring to it as this. I'll be calling it number 4. Finally a different producer. They had used Barbiero and a different guy, together for the last 3 albums. We have a different producer. I neglected to write down his name. Adrian, what did you think of number 4?
Yeah, number 4. I enjoyed this album a lot. Definitely seeing the title, I was like, okay, here we go. But nothing. Really
Tom, what did you get me into here?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Tom. Yeah, this one has a great opener. Into the Now / The Gate, right? Is this like great opener with this long instrumental, I think playing to their strengths, right? Which we know maybe the musical side of things more than the lyrical is their strength. And then it has this like halftime beat drop before the lyrics kick in. And that I was like, okay, we got a good album coming here. Like that really, I think set the stage for the rest of it. Shine Away is kind of like a whole rock opera. It had a real big like feeling. What else was on that one? Need Your Lovin'. I really enjoyed Need Your Lovin'. It had a really solid beat and I was like, this is a good toe tapper, right? All these good songs. Cry was a really solid metal, like to me felt very metal, but with this like slow interludes in it, which I haven't listened to a lot of metal, so I don't know if that's typical of metal, but in my mind, this kind of softer side is not really typical. So it was interesting to see that play out. I did laugh at the song She Want, like he's like, this woman has left me and all these reasons why she's leaving. And one of the things he says is, I've gotten too tall. And I'm like, if you're telling yourself that the reason why your woman is leaving you is because you're too tall, that's not why she left, dude. Like that one just made me chuckle. That one. And then A Lot, spelled as one word, A Lot to Lose. That was almost harder than the album title to overlook that
song goes though. A Lot to Lose.
It's a great song. Yeah, but again, the same as like Talk About It, right? Where you see the song title and I'm like, what is this? And then it's there it is. It's a great song. Yeah. Great solos in that one, great instrumental parts. So yeah, overall, this is a solid album. And I enjoyed a lot of these. I don't know if any of these were big hits for them, but I enjoyed a lot of these songs.
So I had never listened to this album before.
Obviously. How could you?
Here's the thing. I assumed a Tesla record in 1994. I assumed it was a massive flop. This album went gold. Like they always had a core fan base who would buy their records. And one reason why I think it did and why they enjoyed having a core fan base is August of 1994, they really could have made a different album. If they really could have like strived for relevancy by like putting out a Soundgarden or Alice in Chains sounding album. Like everyone was doing it, like
Yep.
Motley Crue was doing that, Poison was doing that. Just a lot of these, these bands from the '80s were starting to lean into grunt. Even Metallica did it to
Yeah.
much more success.
Well, they
In
have
like
to, like,
'96.
do that or die
Yeah,
off, right?
but for most of those bands, it was woefully unsuccessful.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
Tesla, I think, chose to make a record that their fans would like. And this sounds like a Tesla record.
Mm-hmm.
So my credit to them for that. This still hit number 20 on the US album charts. Like, this wasn't a flop by any means. But in the eyes of Geffen, their record label, on which this was their last album, it probably was. And I don't think they put much effort into promoting it. So yeah, so it kind of, as we'll get to, this was their last. They went on hiatus after this. This was their
Mm-hmm.
last album for some time. But you mentioned a lot of the highlights. I mean, "Shine Away," awesome song. "A Lot to Lose," "Need Your Lovin'," all that. I mean, those are solid songs. This is a solid Tesla album.
Yep.
But I'm also gonna mention the closer, "Games People Play," which is a cover from a guy named Joe South, who I was not familiar with. But apparently it was a hit or a minor hit in like 1970.
Okay, so Joe had more of a rock sound. He wasn't a hair metal guy. He was
No, he was kind of like country. I think it was kind of a country song.
interesting.
I thought that was a great closer, though. I really enjoyed Games People Play.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, this is a solid album throughout. I don't think it's as strong of an album as Psychotic Supper, but still very good, very listenable. I'd pick it up on vinyl, despite the name.
Well, you would pick up pretty much. You pick up a lot on vinyl, so that's not necessarily saying something. But despite the name, if you would still buy it,
yeah,
you would be seen purchasing it. That says something.
So they did go on tour the following year to support this album, and then at the conclusion of that tour in early 1996, they called it quits. And they went on a 4-year hiatus and then reformed in 2000 to some fanfare. And I believe I read somewhere that shortly after reforming, they played Arco Arena, which is where the Kings Arena.
Mm-hmm.
And they sold it out and played like a 15,000 seat sellout because it's in Sacramento.
Good for them.
People were happy to see him come back.
It's like hometown
so that's great.
boys come back.
Yeah,
that's
good
great.
for them. And they would tour a bit for a few years, and then in 2004, we enter what I would consider to be the third act of Tesla's career, if we're counting the 90s as Act 2. With Into the Now, released in March 2004. So, Adrian, what do you think of Into the Now?
Yeah, Into the Now. It's funny that we talked about grunge, but grunge is happening 10 years before this, because this album to me had such a grunge sound. And it was like, do these guys know they're way late to the game? I mean, I don't know if maybe grunge is still happening. I feel like by 2003 that grunge is kind of peaked, like quickly peaked, and is not on its way out in a bad way, but just is changed, is evolving as music does. But this one, I was like, yeah, who are they? They're not ripping off Aerosmith anymore. Maybe there's somebody else that they're trying to emulate here. And it's not one of the grunge ones, but I really, really liked "Come to Me." That track, it has more. It reminded me of like a Sister Hazel track, which is about the right time, which is funny to me. "What a Shame," I think was a good one. "Look at Me," even though it has that weird like at in the, they have like the actual, they're like internet times now. So look at me. This album, it was a different sound, and it was interesting to hear kind of how I appreciate the fact that they're evolving. I don't know, maybe some of this sounds pretty like not ripped off, but like almost like they're trying to cover band grunge or cover grunge or I wonder if that's the actual direction they wanted to go, or if that's just kind of what music had been doing in the time. And so that's where they felt they needed to go. Would they have wanted to make more hair metal?
Yeah.
I don't know. But yeah, this was a fine album for me. No super standouts, but I did enjoy "Come to Me." If I was going to pick this one back up, that's one that I would pull out again.
I did not enjoy this album. you nailed it with the production. It definitely got like a late '90s, early 2000s post grunge
Mm-hmm.
production sound to it. It just sounds generic. Like
Right.
it just sounded like the kind of record that 1,000 bands could have recorded.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe some people, I feel like some people felt that way about hair metal, but I don't. Like I think that stuff's excellent, and that the best of it is not interchangeable. But for me, this doesn't. This does feel interchangeable. It sounds like the way it's produced. It sounds like, I don't know. You remember Daughtry, that one guy who was like
Yes.
an American Idol guy who
Yes.
just put out all
Yes.
this like depressing garbage. That's what it sounded like to me. And so very few standouts on this. Really, Miles Away was the only track I really liked. That kind of had like, it kind of felt like sort of the epic tunes that they used to
Mm-hmm.
do.
Mm-hmm.
But even on that one, like just I had to like tune out the production just because I didn't like how, I feel like I'm going back to Led Zeppelin here, like how the drums sounded on it,
Yeah. Right.
like stuff like that just bothered me. And beyond that, like in terms of the subject matter that they were singing about, they just really seemed bummed out on this album.
Yeah.
Like they really seemed like, I don't know, like they had gone through divorces and stuff, because that seemed to be like the kind of subject matter. And I'm just kind of like, this isn't really what I'm looking for if I'm throwing on a Tesla record.
Sure. Sure.
So
this one here, I had a question when I was listening to this one. That song "Come to Me" that I did enjoy had a really strong tambourine part, and I was like, I don't know if we've heard tambourine. I don't recall highlighting tambourine up until this point. It just stuck out to me weird. I was like, why is there a tambourine here? But maybe there's tons of tambourine and I just overlooked it. But
this is some
it
Stevie
just, again,
Nicks erasure. Or did you mean in this history of this show?
No,
tambourine?
No, for this band.
Oh, for Tesla. I thought you meant for every band they've ever done. I was gonna say,
no. Stevie Nicks played that tambourine.
Yeah.
No,
there was some virtuosity on the tambourine.
But it was just
again, you're right. Tesla,
like another
not
sign
big on the
of
tambourine.
Them, no, not until 2003, apparently. But it's just another sign of them changing with the times. So.
This was the last album with our boy Tommy Schiach. Apologies to Tommy if we're mispronouncing his last name.
Tommy, put it in the comments how we're supposed to pronounce your name.
Part ways with the band after this album, and we would continue on from here. 4 years later, October 2008, Forevermore. This album and the previous album, produced by a guy named Terry Thomas. I don't know anything really about Mr. Thomas, but we would bring in Dave Rude on guitar. And I mentioned the producer just because the sound on this album, in my opinion, is a lot different than the sound on the previous album. And I went back and looked. I'm like, are there different producers here? No. Produced by the same guy. I honestly think, part of it is just they sought to make a different album, but also I got to attribute some of it to the incoming Dave Rude, So, Adrian, what did you think? Is this a step in the right direction or is this a step in the wrong direction?
Yeah, Forevermore, I feel like took a very weird turn. Like we went from hair metal to grunge, and now we're going like pop punk almost, right? It has this like harder sound. I don't know, pop, like the I Want to Live had this kind of like pop punk intro to me. This one, I was, again, you mentioned in the last album, he's referencing his relationship troubles, like, Falling Apart and Breaking Free, two songs that both, I think, referenced relationship trouble. But the lyrics, you're like, oh, okay, whatever, I've had enough of this. But the music was very good. And, maybe it's just like a tortured musician that we see here and there. Counting Crows, Adam Duritz's earlier stuff when he was kind of a tortured soul, came across was better music. So for this too, maybe when he's having these relationship troubles, the music is better. But I enjoyed those songs, Falling Apart, Breaking Free, apart from, again, the lyrics. The song So What is like, that is a solid song. It goes, it goes really hard.
Yes.
But it's like such okay boomer energy. Like he's like, he's saying like, oh well, life is hard, well so what, and you're having a bad day, so what, like the world is unfair, so what. It just felt very, I'm like, feel like they're starting to show their age here, maybe at this point, you know. So I don't know. And then we have Private Ledbetter, which is all about this like biography of this person, which we haven't really had many storytelling songs up until this point. And so this one, that was just an odd departure for me. This like storytelling track.
Private Ledbetter takes a turn
Yeah.
because it sounds like it's just going to be sort of a, like a sort of a patriotic. It sounds like it's going to be patriotic,
Right.
and I guess it is in a way, but um, ends up being very much an anti-war kind of thing
Yes.
because the soldier dies and all that.
Yeah.
And yeah, yeah, it definitely you don't. That's not how it sounds in the first verse, though. You don't kind of,
Right.
but yeah, interesting, interesting song. I thought this album was a step in the right direction. I like this a lot better than Into the Now. Um, Still not as good as their previous albums, but more listenable. I like the title track, the opener. Um, Number of things on here that sound like they could be wrestling themes, and I mean that in a good way. Nothing on
Yes, you
Into the
do.
Now could have been a wrestling theme. It was too just sort of shoegazy. I marked So What too. I like it's got a good chorus, I liked that. But this actually sounds more like metal, and that's ultimately what I'm looking for from a Tesla record. So, you know, I can't say this is one that I'm going to necessarily put on regularly, but wasn't mad at this one. It was perfectly fine. So we're going. We got a 6-year layoff at this point, and they come back in June of 2014 with Simplicity.
Hmm.
I'm going to withhold any leading comments whatsoever. And Adrian, what did you think of Simplicity?
Yeah, this one, it's funny because starting to listen to this one, the first few tracks, I'm thinking like, okay, this is just like a standard. The band needed some cash and they just threw together an album and whatever, crank out a bunch of new songs without much variety. But I was so wrong because once you get past the first, I don't know, 3 or 4 or 5 tracks, you have so much variety on this album. And it's like you have Cross My Heart has like twang southern rock to it,
Mm-hmm.
kind of sounded almost
Mm-hmm.
like Little Feat to me. I don't know. Honestly, is like this power ballad with this really smooth start and then this huge rock finish. Flip Side was another really strong one, and a lot of varied tracks. There's no, once you get past the first like 3 or 4 songs, there's no two back to back that are like the same style. We're bouncing around all over the place, and I think that's a real like kudos to the band for being able to do that, right? To be able to showcase so many different styles. I still feel like they're trying to be people that they're not. I thought the song "Sympathy" really sounded kind of like Bush to me. So it's
Mm.
like they're still here, like they're grasping at trying to be like these bigger bands. But yeah, this was a good album. I enjoyed this one, and I think the variety really was a positive on this one.
I thought this album was so good. Like I was
Yeah.
shocked at how good
Yep.
this album is. Um, what I need to do is look at a list of every album that was released in 2014, or like all the significant albums,
Hmm.
so I can corroborate this. I have a theory though that this might be the second best album released in the entire year 2014,
Really?
after Somewhere Under Wonderland by Counting Crows, which of course is the best album of 2014. This album is so good. Um, the opening track is MP3, and there's another one where I just see the title, I'm just like, oh, that's not going to be good. Like boomers singing in the year 2014
Yes.
about MP3s, and the track is so good. Like it's a great track, and actually makes some solid points, which I was shocked. I thought it would just be like complaining, and I thought it was good. Ricochet, I thought it was a solid tune. It sounds like they're actually having fun, which the
Yes.
last two albums did not really sound like they
Yeah.
were having fun. on
Maybe
tracks like
dude got a
Ricochet.
girlfriend or something.
Yeah, they actually sound like they're having a good time and they're remembering why they did this to begin with, and
Hmm.
Rise and Fall and Break of Dawn. I thought had great choruses. They're really show that they have a gift for writing a good hook. But I wanted to really highlight two tracks toward the end of the album. You mentioned Sympathy. I thought Sympathy was fabulous.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, I'm not saying it's a bad song, but I listened to it and I'm like, this
yeah,
sounds like Bush. Yeah.
Sympathy. That solo at the end of Sympathy is
Hmm.
amazing.
Hmm.
Like Frank Hannon still has it. That man is just. I haven't spent enough time this episode talking about what a virtuoso Frank Hannon is, and Tommy Scotch is also very good. But Frank has always been sort of regarded as the better player,
The
whether
guitar player of the
it's
band.
fair or
Yeah.
not.
Yeah.
And he is just unbelievable. He's the one that has that ridiculous solo on Love Song. Sympathy's got an amazing solo at the end, and then Time Bomb, the shredding at the end of Time Bomb is just. If you like great guitar playing, you really need to hear this record. Um, it's excellent. That's not really something that was being done in 2014 anymore. There weren't
Hmm.
that many bands except for old guys like Tesla who were still out here shredding like that. So
Yep.
that was just really refreshing to hear. I loved this album. I will own this on vinyl. I don't know for sure that they released it on vinyl. Hopefully they did, and if so, I will find it.
There we go. That's good. Yeah, this was a solid album. And
Yeah.
one thing across a lot of their albums, they had a lot of tracks on their albums. They're not like
Mm-hmm.
putting out like 8 or 9 track albums.
Uh,
These are long albums. And to have, that was something that struck me like, wow, they really want to get this music out to be putting out so many tracks on every album.
if somebody had Simplicity ranked above number 4, I would understand. I'm not. I don't know for sure if I would, but Simplicity I think can stand with their '90s work. It's
Hmm.
very good.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Before we get to the last one, like that, it makes me happy that they reformed. I would have been happy either way if they reformed, but the fact that they still had an excellent album in them, that's that's awesome.
Yeah.
So good
Well,
on you,
just I think
Tesla.
right. It shows that they did the right thing and that
Yeah,
they getting together, it was worth the effort, it was worth the
yeah.
time, and whatever went into it. And I hope they enjoyed doing that, right? And it
I hope
wasn't
so
just
too.
like, let's, like we've said before for other bands where it's like, what did they just needed some cash, so they got together and threw together this album. Hopefully that wasn't the case here, and they wanted to make music because it's good music. They did a good job.
We really need to see this band live. I really think we need to see
Oh,
Tesla.
that don't meet your heroes, haven't they? Right? Like, how old are these guys now?
Uh, you know, I'm sure they've been taking care of themselves.
Right, right, right.
They're pushing
Joke about it.
70.
Right, right. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Anyway, we've got one more album on the journey. 5 years later, in March 2019. Gosh, I can't believe they're still putting out records in
Yeah.
2019.
Like, this is like, yes. I mean,
Yeah,
2019 was basically yesterday.
we've got Shock.
Yeah.
Adrian, what are your thoughts on Shock?
This one, again, like, they sound like themselves in all these later albums, but they sound like they're trying to connect with current trends or current, like get themselves up in the ranks of current bands. And this is, again, it's another one. They can still do those strong ballads though. We have Forever Loving You, which was great, great song. Throughout this, I've been, joking about, and in my head, definitely as I was listening, I was like, oh, that's Aerosmith, that's Aerosmith, that's Aerosmith. The song Afterlife on this album is
Yes,
absolutely,
that's definitely an
absolutely,
Aerosmith song.
it's Jaded by Aerosmith with those like tom or floor toms, whatever he's playing.
Yeah.
Boom, boom,
Da, ba, boom,
boom.
da,
Yeah.
boom,
Yeah.
da, da,
Yeah.
boom,
It's
boom, bap.
absolutely
Yeah,
Jaded by
yeah,
Aerosmith. The song Comfort Zone. I appreciate the message where he's talking about like, you got to get, for people that, I would not say are good lyricists. I appreciate the lyrics of this one where they're
right.
talking about get out of your comfort zone, try something, do something different. So yeah, this fine album. I would say not their best, but they can still play. They can still
Yeah.
make good music. What did you think about this one, Tom?
I did not like this record.
Yeah.
This was a big step back from Simplicity, only because like Simplicity was still like really a hard rock album. This is
Mm-hmm.
not. This they kind of lost their music has kind of lost its edginess, and sort of the one that really encapsulates this is, and again, is one of those titles I saw, and I was like, oh boy, I don't know. And see, I was wrong on Toke about it, and some of these others. Like the title, you shouldn't judge a book by its cover. Well, this one you should. And California Summer Song
Oh
is
yeah,
really
terrible,
bad, really
terrible.
bad. I wrote down this is like Kid Rock backed by the Goo Goo Dolls. Like it was just awful.
Maybe that's what they were going for, though. Kid Rock
Yeah,
backed by the Goo Goo Dolls.
yeah,
Yeah, and the whole thing, like it was like reminiscing about, oh, we're young on the beach, and it was like it was kind of out of step for them, right? They didn't really have a lot of these songs where they're like looking back at their
yeah.
youth, right?
So I didn't enjoy this album, but you know what? They had many more hits than they did misses, in my opinion. So
Mm-hmm.
you're allowed a mulligan now and again. And
Yep.
anyway, that completes the album journey. So we will wrap it up the way we always wrap up the album journey with Adrian. Top three, bottom one.
Yeah. Number three. You went
Number
number
three.
three? I think my number three is the fourth album. That one,
Wow.
yeah, had some. I really enjoyed some of those songs, and I wonder if going into it feeling like, oh, this is going to be because of like, oh, this is going to be stupid, and then like gave it an edge where I was like, oh, I'm
Yeah.
actually like happily surprised at this. So yeah, the fourth album. What about you? Number three.
Number three for me is Psychotic Supper. I think it was still true to their sound, but was much more ambitious. I thought it really had some strong songs on it. Edison's Medicine, awesome tune. What You Give's a great song. Yeah, I think it's a solid record.
Number two for me is going to be Simplicity. That one really like,
Wow.
yeah, that one came out, it was like a
Whoa.
good album. I enjoyed a lot of those songs.
So
And
I predicted that someone could rank Simplicity
yeah,
above. I
yeah,
just
and
didn't know
I
it would be that
did.
high. Wow.
Yeah, that one I enjoyed. And I think, good on them for, what is that,
Yeah.
20, 30 years later, pulling that out. So,
Incredible. Wow. I am speechless. Number two is Five Man Acoustical Jam.
mhm.
I don't know where it ranks on my list of favorite live albums, but it is on that list
Yeah.
somewhere. It's a great live album, front to back. The playing is excellent. The crowd is red hot. Just a great live album, and yeah, very solid listen.
And well, that leads right into number one for me is number one, Five Man Acoustical Jam. That was my absolute favorite album. I like
Yeah,
going to live shows. I enjoy that and hearing that. I think the back and forth with the crowd and the energy and the, you know, hearing them do the songs kind of in a different light, but not terribly where they're like, you're like, what is this craziness? They're, like Counting Crows and a Counting Crows concert, right? Where you hear some of their songs, you're like, this is nothing like that. Them still doing it their way, but acoustic. I really enjoyed that album for sure.
number one for me is the Great Radio Controversy. Um, as again, I understand that there are folks who do not enjoy the term hair metal, but I'm going to use it here for simplicity's sake. Not the album Simplicity, just simplicity in general. I really think the Great Radio Controversy is. I mean, it's got to be top five hair metal albums. Great record, some just enduring classics on there, and I mean, I think something can sound of its time without sounding dated, and I would say
Right.
that of that. It sounds of its time, but it doesn't sound dated, and I think it's just as enjoyable a listen now as it was, gosh, 35 years ago.
Yeah. It's great. Yeah. 35. Oh my God, crazy.
I know.
And then bottom one, bottom one for me is Shock. That one, that last album was kind of a throwaway.
Yeah. Bottom one, definitely Shock. Agreed. No further
Yep.
comment required.
Yep.
Um,
All right, Tom, I'm
that'll,
going to ask you.
yeah.
Do you got it on vinyl?
I don't. It's killing me. Every time I walk into a record store, I walk to the T's of the rock section just to on the off chance that they've got some Tesla record floating around.
Yeah, they have Simplicity just shoved in the back there.
Man, don't tease me with that. But no, I'm shocked I haven't run into like great radio controversy somewhere. I never have. And I could buy them online, but as we've established, that's not as much fun. I like to look for them in the store, and I have never seen a Tesla record, or I would have bought it. The first two albums have been re-released. 5-Man Acoustical Jam, I don't think it has, and it's not crazy expensive, but it's not cheap to find it on vinyl.
Yeah.
So no, the short answer is no. I don't have it on vinyl, much to my chagrin. I went to a record store 2 days ago in hopes that I would find something to share today, and I didn't.
Keep searching.
And you?
It'll come.
You got it on vinyl?
No. I had never even heard of this band.
I had to ask. Moving on, the next
we have to
staple,
ask.
We have to ask. Better than Led Zeppelin?
So I would put Tesla. We have quite a list now. This is what, our 8th or 9th episode that we've done, 8th episode. I would put Tesla pretty far down the list. But I don't think that we have not done a band yet where either of us are like, this is terrible. This is the bottom of the barrel.
No, we haven't.
They're the bottom. You know what I mean? Like the bottom of our list is like mid-level bands, right?
Tesla is not last place for me.
Yeah, they're not last place for me either. I would put Tesla right above the Doors. I still have the Doors at the bottom, and I would put Tesla above.
I wonder how the guys from Tesla feel about that, because they were probably big Doors fans growing up.
Right. They referenced the Doors in one of these albums. Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome. No, I have, out of our 8 bands that we've done so far, I have Tesla number 6, directly below Stevie Nicks. But I have the Doors much higher than you.
Mm-hmm.
So I have it Tesla, My Morning Jacket, Cars.
Really?
I do.
I'm surprised by all of those. Okay. Different strokes for different folks, I guess.
Yeah. I like Tesla. What can I say? They're a good band. So Tesla, thank you for giving us the subject matter for today's episode. It is a goal of mine to see Tesla. If not, in the next couple of years, because who knows how much longer they'll be touring for. So,
Yep.
See you soon, Tesla.
They are touring.
I saw. Not here.
It's just like Florida.
Yeah,
which
I know.
Made me laugh.
I looked. But maybe they'll announce more dates, and maybe they'll come here. And
maybe.
And if so, I'm going to try to make that happen.
Yeah, sounds good. Well, I think it's interesting that we reference the fact that our lists, as we're ranking these, our lists have ended up differently, obviously, because while we overlap in a lot of our musical tastes, we do have a lot of differences in our musical tastes.
Yeah.
You and I as well, Tom. So next episode's band, we have not done we've bounced around. We've done a lot of different times, right? We haven't done a more current, like, band of now, which you don't really like a lot of music that bands are putting out now. Nope.
It's true.
It's very true. But I think we need to do a current band. And I recently have started listening. I told you about this band before, so it's not totally out of left field. But I have started listening to a band, and I want us to talk about their catalog because I want you to listen to it and discuss it with me. And so next episode is Wild Pink, is the band Wild Pink.
Wild Pink.
Yeah, you have.
Okay.
It's rock, indie rock. It's a bunch of guys playing guitars.
Okay, well,
yeah,
how bad could it be then?
No, I could have gone much worse.
I know you could have.
Yeah.
I could have too. Let's be honest.
Yeah, and
No,
not to torture anyone. I think it's
the
great music, and
yeah,
I would
no,
love
I'm
to
just
discuss
teasing
it.
you.
So,
The variety is what makes this fun. You know, like
absolutely.
I wouldn't want this to be an all hair metal show or an all classic
Yeah,
rock
that's the
show.
next
So,
one we'll do. Is
um,
all
yeah.
hair metal all the time.
But no, that's good. We'll let's do it. Do you know offhand how many albums they have?
Five, quick
Oh,
and easy. 5 albums and a bunch of
great.
random EPs here and there, but I think
Yeah.
it's 5 studio albums. And last one just came out a few months ago, so we're talking
All
really
right.
like current. Yep.
Wild Pig. Okay, great. Well, we will look forward to that.
Will we?
Anything else, Adrian?
No, that's it for me. This was a fun exercise. I'm glad we
It
did it.
was. It was. Thank you for doing it with me, and thank you everyone for joining us for another episode of Courtesy Listen. We hope you enjoyed it. Let us know down in the comments, what are your favorite Tesla albums? You know, what are your thoughts on Tesla? I'm sure you have many, and we want to hear them all. So comment, like, subscribe, and keep watching. Let's uh let's all get healthy for us to all get together and talk about the good things in the world together. So thanks for joining us again. And remember, everyone's a critic and most people are DJs. Good night, Sacramento. There will be no encore.